Hello, good morning and welcome to NewsX. We're live on DSTV channel 421, Go TV channel 125 across all our social media handles. We're joining you on TV. This morning I'm quite excited. I'll tell you why in a minute, but coming up within the next 60 seconds, giving life to political promise. We'll hear from the finance minister designate who vows to abolish the betting tax and the E-levy in his first budget.
For example, the betting tax is bringing in less than 50 million Ghana cedis a year. It's a nuisance tax. Scrapping 50 million Ghana cedis will not mean anything in a way that will affect the economy.
Also coming up, government to merge Bui Power Authority at VRA.
Intend to privatize any of those plants because they produce about 45% of our national requirements.
We have some reactions from stakeholders, and also coming up, Office of the Special Prosecutor investigates suspected corruption and related offences surrounding the construction of the National Cathedral. We have these plus some business updates within the next 60 minutes. A good time to take a seat and be my guests. Thanks for choosing us. We're your home of independent, fearless, and credible journalism. Now we start with the finance minister designate, Dr. Ato Forson, because he says he will abolish betting tax and the E-levy in his first budget when he's approved to assume that role as minister. Dr. Forson argues that the current betting tax has failed to achieve its intended objectives and should be scrapped. He stressed that the betting tax and the E-levy had not produced the expected revenue and it had intended to do, and it burdened the sector without benefiting the broader economy. Well, let's listen to him speak during the vetting yesterday.
Ghana currently collects approximately 13.8% of GDP in terms of tax revenue, according to the latest data I've cited as part of the transition. It is obvious that we can do better. I've studied the Ghana economy for some time, and I can say without mentioning a word that Ghana has huge potential when it comes to tax revenue mobilization. You don't necessarily have to increase taxes before you rake in revenue. You have the handles. What we need to do is to improve compliance. I will work with the JRA, the tax policy unit of the Ministry of Finance, to ensure that we increase compliance and to raise the revenue as much as we can. In the medium term, it is my vision, when approved, to increase the revenue from 13.8, tax revenue from 13.8% of GDP to about 16 to 18%. That will be able to compare ourselves to our peers. I believe the potentials are out there. It doesn't necessarily mean we should increase taxes. Yes, we have obviously announced that we are going to scrap certain taxes. We'll stick to just that. But it doesn't also mean that we don't care about the revenue. We care about the revenue. And we will have to do more on revenue. But it doesn't necessarily mean we should increase taxes. Some of the taxes out there are not bringing in the revenue that it should. For example, the betting tax is bringing in less than 50 million Ghana cedis a year. It's a nuisance tax. Scrapping 50 million Ghana cedis will not mean anything in a way that will affect the economy if you are to adjust, particularly from the expenditure side. I mean, the noise with the betting tax and all does not comprehend the imposition of such a tax. And so I believe that scrapping such a tax will not necessarily affect the forward march of the Ghanaian economy.
So what would be the financial implications should government scrap the E-levy and the betting tax? Let me bring in lead data analyst here at Joe News, Isaac Kofi. He joins me in the studio with more. Isaac, let's get an understanding how much this tax is actually rake in for government and what the impact would be on the economy if it is scrapped.
I think we should first start from this number 112. That tells you how the economy is an important, issue to the NDC. They made 112 promises, and the bigger framework has to do with the 24-hour economy, which according to the NDC will be that framework that almost all the other economic promises will actually hover around. And you spoke about the tax cuts ranging from the E-levy to the pollution or emissions tax, plus some import duties tax scrapping that will go to vehicles and other products that are actually imported into the country for agricultural purposes only. There's also the rationalization of import duties in general. So in fact, if you listen to the president, he spoke about a tall list of taxes on clearing a certain vehicle and why it has to be rationalized. All of this, you need to ask yourself that what is the opportunity cost? So what we are going to do is to look at what the IMF expects from government of Ghana under the current ECF program versus what the government wants to do. Clearly, if you listen to the vetting yesterday, you could see that if you're going to, scrap all of these taxes, we spoke about it, and we said that if you do the estimation from 2025 to 2028, you should be expecting at least some 25 billion Ghana cedis from 3 of the taxes. Talking about E-levy, COVID-19, and then betting tax, you should be getting some 25 billion Ghana cedis within the 4-year period. The question is, that is the opportunity cost. How are you going to find alternative to plug that hole? So in fact, we actually spoke about how you can actually, plug that hole, and then also, the fact that we are under an IMF program definitely will tell you that you would have to go to the fund to negotiate. At this moment, crucial tax handles and policies like scrapping cannot be taken in a unilateral form. Government would have to engage the fund. We all saw when the MPP administration, the Akufo-Addo administration wanted to suspend the price stabilization and recovery levy in 2023 and 2024. We all saw how it was opposed. Why? Because they were under an IMF program. Now, they are saying that they are going to stick with what they have promised, abolish all these taxes. But the question is, what is the IMF expecting from Ghana as a country or the government? In 2025, the IMF expects that if you look at the tax revenue percentage to GDP, they expect that we should move it from the current 13 point something, which, the projection was that by the end of 2024, we should be getting somewhere around 14.5. We are not there yet. But they expect that by the end of 2025, the country should get a tax to GDP, tax revenue to GDP ratio of 14.9%. That's a big ask. So if you are going to achieve 14.9%, definitely, if you scrap some of the taxes and revenues go away, you definitely will have to find a way to plug that hole to achieve that 14.9% tax to GDP ratio.
But that is currently under the program we're under. We've heard from John Mahama serve notice that he's willing to renegotiate the current IMF deal that we're under. Would that affect that figure in any way moving forward? Well,
so usually what we see when government talk about renegotiation is that they usually will go for extension. Okay. We also saw that in 2017, the Akufo administration renegotiated the 16th IMF program, extended it for a year. So instead of it ending somewhere 2018, it ended 2019. They will definitely get some cash. But when you renegotiate an extension, definitely it tells you that some austerity measures will also come in place because they will do some projections and see your problem. So definitely for the IMF, revenue mobilization is very, very key because this is a country that has suspended most of its debt servicing obligation, will be resuming this year. So you need to collect more to pay your debt. So if you're going to scrap it, the question is, how are you going to plug that hole? Already, the NDC has given an indication that, look, they know that expenditure is bloated. If you're able to rationalize and cut down some expenditure, you could create some savings there. Also, they are aware that tax exemptions, we know that they oppose the current tax exemption that could not fall through in Parliament. Tax exemption alone is about 2% of Ghana's GDP. If you do the math, it should be between $2 to $2.5 billion. That is huge. If they are able to close that gap, a lot will be added to the kitty. So it's not just about the taxes, but how you rationalize and how you're able to collect more. So I'm sure that they will be looking at that aspect as well to achieve that 14.9% target. So in terms of real values, that was the percentage. Let's put the values in nominal context or in real terms. Okay. So in terms of what the IMF expects from us in terms of tax revenue, right from 2023 to 2027, you could see how they expect us to increase our tax revenue from, let's say, 148 billion Ghana cedis in 2024 to 175 billion Ghana cedis. That's a huge jump between 2024 and 2025. So how is the government going to find the additional close to 20 billion or more than 20 billion Ghana cedis that will be between 2024 and 2025?
Well,
maybe
they might want to broaden the tax net, because that's the concern many have raised, that with the few numbers that are paying taxes, you're overburdening us with too much taxes. The reason why government will want to ease that burden with the abolishment of the E-levy, betting tax, COVID levy, what have not. But to balance that, they might have to broaden the tax net and rope in more people. That's why they've served notice that road tolls may come back. And so that's another revenue making measure for them as government. But let's look at, was government able to hit some of these targets as far back as 2023?
Now, in 2023, because when you're an IMF program, you definitely will achieve some of your tax revenues or revenue target, because they monitor you. You would have to put in measures in place to make sure that your collection process is very, very efficient. But what we know is that in terms of 2025, revenues will be key. Revenue collection will be key, because 2025 is a pivotal year. It will send a clear indication to the investors as to whether we will still be able to pay our debt. Remember, in 2023, when we had revenues around 114 billion Ghana cedis, we could not pay our debt. We had to suspend the debt.
And so the restructuring.
Exactly, we did all the restructuring. Exactly. I mean, if you compare it to the expenditure side, very bloated expenditure. Some rationalization has been done in 2024. We hope that it continues. And the government has sent a clear indication that it's not going to operate a very big government. I mean, we've seen the cutting down of the number of ministries from 30 to 23 is significant. But the key question is, how much is the savings? You spoke about, the road tolls. Road tolls in general, if you estimate, brings in about 72 million Ghana cedis. You are foregoing 25 billion Ghana cedis in a span of, let's say, 4 years. One of the taxes, if you do the math, brings in about 400 million Ghana cedis to the kitty every year. So the substitution effect must be equal or more, because you cannot compare 72 million Ghana cedis of road tolls to, let's say, 300 or 400 million Ghana cedis that you get from E-levy. I am not saying that E-levy should stay. I'm only saying that governments must find perfect substitute when they go to the table to negotiate with the IMF. Other than that, it might be difficult for them.
Because of our external debt restructuring, we know that the timeline given us may be lapsing in this government. It means they would be paying back a lot of our loans, meaning they will need more money to run government. So let's see how it goes, though.
I mean, talking about loans, for instance, just interest payment alone in this year, as projected by the IMF, even after restructuring and everything, should hit more than 60 billion Ghana cedis. It will be interesting to see how governments wants to rationalize most of the taxes, how to raise revenue to cater for a whopping 60 billion Ghana cedis of interest payment alone. We are not talking about even amortization.
Oh, thank you so much, Kofi, bringing us that update. Now, let me bring in economist and tax consultant Eric Aponsah-Boateng. Thank you so much for your time here on News 6. I just want to understand, looking at government's proposal to scrap key taxes like the betting tax, COVID levy tax, as well as E-levy, what gap would that leave us in when it comes to revenue mobilization and running the economy? As a tax consultant, that's your area of specialty.
Thank you very much. And good morning to your viewers and listeners. I listened to the president when he went around during his campaign tour, and he made it clear that he was going to abolish these three taxes. And so what went through my mind at the time was that nobody at that forum or event asked him how he was going to bridge the gap. Okay, yes, we have just been informed that these three taxes raked in 25 billion within the past 4 years. Okay, and the question is that is the gap if we are to go by what we are being told. I believe that Ghana is still a country that is trying to be on its feet. And therefore, you need to be able to raise revenue internally so that you'll be able to support your budget. And so, if we have this gap, the question is that how are we going to raise that revenue to be able to support the budget? And I would be quick to add that yes, there are so many things that we can do. First of all, we need to expand the tax net, because I believe that there are so many persons in Ghana who are outside the net. And that is why at the moment we are having the tax to GDP ratio of the 14.5%. But when you take sub-Saharan Africa, it is hovering around 22%. What this means is that we have a lot of businesses, a lot of individuals who are not filing their tax returns and making the payments. And so I would say that yes, I've just mentioned one of them. But if you really want to break in the revenue, apart from the fact that you need to expand the tax net, you have to ensure that compliance rates are very high. And you will agree with me. You see, taxpayers or individuals are always going to be tax compliant if the tax rates are low. And then, most importantly, in trying to bring up some of these taxes, you must engage them. There should be stakeholder meetings, and those that are going to be affected must be in the picture. When that happens, they gladly embrace those taxes that they want to introduce, and then we are going to get to where we want to get to. Yes. One other thing that we can do is that we have to bring back the tolls, the road tolls. And I'm saying we have to bring them back, and if we want to ensure that we actually rake in the revenue that we expect, we must have an automation. You will agree with me, a few years ago when the wager road toll, when we had it automated, the revenue increased by 300%. Okay, another issue that we have to look at is the withholding tax, the reliefs or the exemptions that we give to the multinational companies and all of that. Yes, tax exemptions are good, but you must make sure that you grant those exemptions to companies or individuals that will be able to take advantage. And whatever that they are doing within the country is going to lead to a boost in the economy, which will translate into a higher GDP. So if I'm to make a list, I'm sure that I have about 8, 9 of them, but probably time wouldn't allow us to go through all of them.
Okay, now let me come in at this point, Mr. Eric.
Okay.
Ghanaians voted for change because we all agree that the people were overburdened with tax. You are proposing broadening the tax net, but then how do we go about it in such a way that it doesn't also affect how people go about taxes? I'm saying this because government introduced the E-levy as part of measures to broaden the tax net. And people found ways to evade the E-levy people started doing banking transactions, direct transactions, cash transactions, so that they would not have to go through mobile money transactions. Now, it shows that people are just generally unwilling to pay taxes. So what alternative does a government have to raise revenue apart from taxing the individuals?
Okay, thank you very much. You see, for the E-levy, I initially had a problem with it. And I remember a few years ago, before its introduction, I was on this same studio or the platform with the then ex-finance minister, Mr. Seth Tepe, yes. And I said that, in my opinion, we didn't need the E-levy. Notwithstanding that, you see, the problem that I personally have with the E-levy is that we should be able to differentiate between income and probably a remittance or a gift. I'm in the formal sector. Before my salary hits my bank account, the PAY has been deducted. If I'm sending money to my mother in the village, Asante Achim South, and have to pay the levies on them or on it, it doesn't make sense. However, if I'm buying a product from somebody, business online, okay, and I'm paying that person, it is income in the hands of that person. And so the problem has always been the fact that we were not able to distinguish between income in the hands of a person and then monies or a remittance in the hands of that same person. Now, we are also even looking at inflation. Okay, we are looking at inflation, even though that is beside the point. But it is also a key factor, because if you're able to mobilize the revenue and it comes to expenditure and your city is so weak, what it means is that you are actually spending more than what you ought to spend because your currency is very weak. Now, data, that is our major issue in Ghana. You realize that the informal sector is quite huge. And I suggest that we should all think about how we'll be able to bring in those in the informal sector who earn a lot of revenue. We should be able to find a way. And that is why, personally, I was very happy when the Ghana card was introduced. You remember? And I remember very well that immediately we matched our tax identification numbers with the Ghana card. It's raked in 2 million taxpayers. And so the GRA had that opportunity to invite all those persons to their offices, give them an assessment, or bring them into the tax net. And so I think that basically the data, and fortunately, we have the Ghana card, we have the data. Why don't we, for example, find a way of bringing those outside the net? Let me give you one good example which we can use. If I go to DVLA to renew my driver's license or my road worthy, isn't that information? That is data. And you will agree with me that Ghanaians, most of us own vehicles. Some own 10 vehicles, tractors, articulated trucks, and all of that. So I think that it is even very easy for us to get the data that we need, because with the data, we'll be able to plan and know, for example, that yes, if we are so much in terms of the numbers and we want to bring in a tax, we can even, based on the data, agree on the rate. Because you see, if the tax rate is very low, the compliance level will be very high, and you'll be able to rake in the revenue that you need.
As we wrap up the conversation, though, we know that Ghana has a lot of external debt, and servicing of this debt will be due sooner than later. It means this government will have to spend a lot of money servicing debt. Looking at the tax reliefs they are promising, scrapping the betting tax, the E-levy, COVID levy, for example, what do you foresee that in future they may repackage these taxes for us because of the financial obligations they may have to meet?
Okay, thank you. You see, it is easier said than done. And when you are on a political platform, somebody will tell you that, oh, At that time, whatever that you say is probably just to win the votes. Okay, but I remember just last week, I had a chat with the AGI president. And what he told me was that, oh, Eric, we are waiting, we are giving the president just about a month for him to settle down. And the AGI is going to go to him and say, yes, we are ready. We expect you to implement everything that you have said, because the business community, including myself, I was excited about, because, if he imports anything, I remember last year, 2 years ago, I brought in a vehicle, okay, and when the agent gave me the invoice, I said, wow, special import levy, ECOWAS levy, COVID levy, and so many of them. And you see, if you are a business person, and those of the business people who are into the manufacturing sector, where a lot of their raw materials are imported, at the end of the day, then you will not be able to run your business, because at the end of the day, because the city is always depreciating, you're going to have a big issue with running the business. And so I think that I would advise government that we should also look at how we'll be able to control inflation. And over the past, it's either done through the fiscal or the monetary policy. But I think that the two have to be done at the same time if you really want to reduce inflation in Ghana.
Thank you, Eric Aponsa-Boateng. He's a tax consultant and an economist. Now, away from that, let's talk about another sector that is quite important, the energy sector. The Energy Minister-designate, John Jinapor, has proposed merging the Volta River Authority and We Power Authority into a single entity to be known as the Ghana Power Company. While government has outlined plans to consolidate key players in Ghana's energy sector to boost efficiency and ensure strategic management of the national energy resources. Now, John Jinapor spoke during his vetting by Parliament's appointment committee yesterday. We'll be back to talk about that, but let's listen to him.
Chairman, that proposed measure is on our table, except that our approach is different. We believe that we can merge Bui Power and VRA so that you have something like Ghana Power Company or whatever. We do not intend to privatize. So when you merge them, you have a holding company and 3 subsidiaries: hydro components, thermal components, and renewable components, all under one umbrella, but controlled by both VRA and Bui. They would determine how they want to run it. They would determine how they want to move with it. We do not intend to privatize any of those plants because they produce about 45% of our national requirement. And as a strategic step, you do not put all your energy assets in private hands. So let me assure the workers, we'll consult them. This is just an idea that we intend to implement. If we need to tweak it, we will do that with them and bring about efficiency.
So government is willing to engage, they're willing to tweak it, but it's a proposal that they're looking at implementing during their tenure. Let's engage Derek Hatcher now. He is an economist, a research and policy analyst, Institute for Energy Security. Thank you so much for your time here on NewsDesk. Now let's get your thoughts. A merger, it means some people may lose their job. Isn't that the case? Mute for me, Derek, so that I can hear you loud and clear.
Measure in. Okay, so what I said is that when you are talking about measure, you are not talking about people losing their jobs. You are talking about efficiency. You are talking about synergy in the energy sector. You are talking about synergy between these two companies. It brings about more investment. It brings about cost-benefit analysis. It can help people to take advantage of things that probably they would have not been able to do doing it single. And so the benefits of a measure outweighs far more than what you are just citing out as people losing out their jobs. Already, when you talk about measure, and there's a measure between VRA and a bui power, though it will lead to an expansion. Now, when there's an expansion, it means that more people will get their jobs to do. People will get new way to do other things. They'll get more opportunities, and then people losing their jobs of that fear will not be something that will be realized. And so the measure is a good thing. But as to how it will be done, there needs to be a proper consultation and engage all those in the sector so that you'll be able to come up with the best idea.
Government already served notice that they are open to engagement to ensure that they even tweak their plan to ensure that everyone is on board when it comes to key players in the energy sector. But let's look at the pros and cons of a possible merger at this point in time. We're looking at how effective it will help run the energy sector. Tell me your thoughts.
Right. So basically, the measure would be a good thing because when you look at the current situation, VRA and the bui power all into the hydro and the renewable energy space. One thing that is keeping VRA running is because they have a thermal component. That thermal helps them to generate money. And then when they give out the hydro power to ECG is not able to comply. They're not able to comply with the cash water mechanism to be able to pay them promptly. And so when you take away the thermal component, definitely that will affect them. But when you merge the two, it will give them a strategic direction as to how to be able to bring out that energy transition that we are talking about renewable energy, because there are two experts of both fields coming together will bring out the best possible idea. And in the current situation, what we are talking about, if the government is able to comply with the cash water flow mechanism of any power that is being generated, that will be able to pay them, especially when ECG is more efficient, reducing distribution losses, then it means that what we are talking about, the possible measure, will bring about the needed benefits for Ghana.
One of the big concerns that was raised yesterday by John Jinapor was the ballooning debt accrued in the energy sector. Unfortunately, President John Dramani Mahama made us aware that the ESLA bonds, which was supposed to provide some sort of financial cushion to the energy sector, has not been used effectively. Now, even in the face of this measure, let's look at another sector, which is ECG and its operation. How best do you feel that ECG can bounce back on its feet?
All right. So ECG can bounce back when they have a leadership, or when they have a leader that is firm to making the right decisions. Because what needs at ECG is somebody who is a leader, not somebody who will just go to political, political because of the appointing authority. No, you must stand firm, take the right decisions, and be able to go after them. One issue we have with the ECG is that there are a lot of power cuts. And so the distribution losses because of people doing illegal connections, a whole lot of other things. Go after them. If I give you 50 megawatts of power, and you know that it is given to this enclave, and you know that when you sell 50 megawatts of power, you are supposed to get this amount of money. When that amount of money is not realized, what do? Go and find out why you are not able to realize that amount of money. Go after the people who are consuming the power so that you'll be able to get in the money. Now, when you take ECG, as expected of them, they are supposed to collect the revenue. Now, they do less than 50% of revenue collection. Now, tell me which company will be able to survive if you have a less than 50% revenue collection when you have about 30% of distribution losses going and then you cannot.
I recall just last year, the ECG, they tried to revamp their revenue collection drive. But then how effective that was, we're yet to see. Should privatization be the way to go for ECG?
Privatization is not taken off. It is also an option. It will lead to more efficiency. It will lead to more capital injections. It will take away the political interference.
We seem to be losing connection to Derek. We'll rework our lines. Okay, Derek, I have you back now. Just make that point as we wrap up the conversation. Unfortunately, I still don't have Derek. As we work the lines to get him back, you can share your thoughts with us. We're joining you on TV on all our social media platforms. Now, moving on, the Office of the Special Prosecutor has launched investigations into suspected corruption and corruption-related offences surrounding the construction of the National Cathedral, focusing on procurement of contractors and materials, as well as payments authorized by the former Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta and the National Cathedral Secretariat. Well, the investigation follows a referral from the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, which concluded its probe into allegations of corruption, abuse of power and misconduct in November 2024. The OSP has also announced plans to investigate and prosecute individuals who disrupted the 2024 general elections in various unlawful ways. In its media report, the OSP says it has received numerous petitions of election-related offences from both members of the public and candidates who contested in the elections. Well, we'll be having a conversation on that this morning, but let me just run you through some of the key things the OSP highlighted in the statement that they have released yesterday. They've been operating for the past 6 years, and the conversation now is moving to how effective the Office of the Special Prosecutor is, because, mind you, in 6 years of operation, we're yet to see one single prosecution, and so begs the question, the relevance of the Office of the Special Prosecutor. But then that's on your screens right now, giving us just a background of what is happening and the OSP, what they're keeping their tabs on. That report is for the second or last quarter of the year 2025, between the July and the December. So it's 6 months running. That's how long this case has been on. So I'll let them move to the initial slide so that we take it from the top. We're just looking at some of the key cases that the OSP is keeping their tabs on. Now, first, they say that they have concluded a number of investigations so far, and that is coming up on your screen shortly. I would like them to take it slowly for me so that I could take them through it. They are actually going to focus now on 2 key investigations moving forward, which we have taken out of that document. The National Cathedral is one of that key area they would be looking at. They're going to be focusing on the National Cathedral procurement in that sector and also payments made. And so the former Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, is a person of interest in this investigation. Now, they have given us a breakdown of some of the key developments they have worked on throughout the period. That's between July and December. And they've also told us what they plan to do. And they're saying that they will be launching investigations into allegations of vote buying before and during the elections. They also gave us updates on the Airbus scandal. If you recall, they found no evidence of inducement, and they released that out. So as part of a wrap of some of the key things they had done in the year 2025, they highlighted some of these key cases, and that exonerated the now President John Dramani Mahama from any wrongdoing in that Airbus scandals. Now, they say that they concluded investigations within a period for 3 different cases, and they are awaiting directives and further action from the Special Prosecutor himself, Kisi Jabin, to proceed further. So far within July and December, they say they have worked on 3 different cases. And then we're looking at some of the key things that they're looking at, and they're keeping their tabs on. The recruitment exercise of cadet officers training at the Ghana Police Academy. They also say they are investigating the allegations of use of public office for profit, and that implicates Mr. Charles Bisu. They're also looking at procurement and award of contract to Tough Sports Ghana Company Limited by the Gaming Commission of Ghana. And so we're just looking at some of the key things that the OSP has worked on within the half-year report. So far, the big question now is no convictions within the period since the OSP office was created 6 years ago. We still don't have any convictions. And it begs the question how relevant it is. You hear the OSP put out that they're going after A and B, but how relevant is it? And so joining me right now is a member of the African Union Advisory Board on corruption, an anti-corruption campaigner. Thank you so much for your time here on Newstext. Now, let's look at the Office of the Special Prosecutor before we come into some of the key things they have said they would be working on since its inception, with Martin Amidou down now to Kisi Jabing. How effective is the Office of the Special Prosecutor?
Well, I'll say from my perspective, it has been extremely effective. I say so because there's a context within which Act 959 was developed. And that context was the fact that, by and large, civil society and beyond recognized that the Attorney General and Minister Justice of the state was absolutely unlikely to prosecute any member of government so appointed. And we had tried several times to try and get traction on that. We concluded that you needed somebody arm's length from the government of the day to be willing to begin to take up issues with government officers and others as well beyond the public domain, especially with high-level issues of corruption and impunity. And to that extent, we've seen that shift. That's the primary thing. Let's begin to make sure that such persons are being hauled before the law. I also say so within the context that don't forget that for the first 4 years, that office was literally manned by less than 15 people, probably just about 10. It wasn't until the last quarter of 2023 that they were given permission to now engage staff. So to all extents and purposes, that office became properly equipped in terms of capacity, labor capacity, in 2024. So if you wanted to do a real assessment, it's from 2024, they've had, let's say, 1 year of being equipped with the kind of manpower to do the work required. And yet in that space of time, they've taken quite a number of cases. In our space for good governance, we say that prevention is better than prosecution, because prevention makes sure that you don't then spend or throw good money after bad money, like they say, and go chasing things which you might not be able to retrieve in the long run. So I think that it has served as a deterrent. I think it has served as a mechanism to pick up big ticket issues of corruption. It has served as a way of ensuring that persons in government have been held, have been investigated, and you see that the posture of governments have been uncomfortable. It's been evident to all of us that persons in government have been uncomfortable with the existence of an OSP because they know they'll come after them and they do not fear taking up these issues. So for me, it's been very effective given the context within which we decided to set it up.
What's your reading into this fresh move by the OSP to investigate the issues regarding the National Cathedral and some payments made by the then Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta? Looking at the timing, is it right?
I think that the OSP, as you know, is an independent institution, allowed to use its discretion to decide what issues to take up at what point. I see that the issue of the National Cathedral is topical. It is relevant. Indeed, one of the expectations of the OSP was not to have a situation where issues come up and nobody seems to be responding. And so it is relevant if the OSP has decided to take up the issue on the back of the work done by Trudge, which has been very explicit in talking about contracts that ought not to have been issued and what have you. And mind you, I think it's a referral. So if there's been a referral, the documentation and the paper trail suggests that it's been put before them and they ought to act on it. And so I think it's not an issue of an unjustified timing. I think the logic of the timing makes sense within the context and within the referral.
But some critics argue that really the Office of the Special Prosecutor, some of these investigations may lead nowhere, given its track record of failing to secure a single successful corruption prosecution since its inception. You agree?
No, I don't agree.
Why?
I think that it's just like also looking at the developmental progress of any nation. If you do an assessment of the European democracies. It took them about 200 years to get to the point where people will be impressed, so to speak, with what they've achieved. Take us as a nation. How far have we come? 60-something plus years. Whatever you start, it takes time to get everything in place. In my view, where we are now, we have clearly identified that some of our gaps are with the current legislative framework. There's a need to strengthen it. There are laws that we don't have in place. We don't have a reverse burden of proof. We don't have an unexplained wealth legal framework. That's important. We don't have the Code of Public Officers Conduct passed, something that would then make it distinctly clear that these are offenses and these are the sanctions to be applied if you went before a court. So the OSP may be struggling in court because the legal framework and environment has not been properly defined to assist it. I also think that we need specialized courts that will fast-track issues of good governance and corruption. That way, those courts would have people trained to understand the terrain, people willing to understand what it needs to be done to set these precedents that make it serve as a deterrent for other persons so minded to attempt to get into corruption. So I think that we should not look at the OSB as the criminal, as the offender here. You need to understand the exigencies and the challenges that they are also confronted with from a technical perspective. So we have to do work on our legal framework. In other jurisdictions, these things are clear. Look at the Cecilia Dapar case. Whilst the OSP law doesn't allow them to look into issues of unexplained wealth, etc., the Yoko law had that clause clearly spelled out, but Yoko refused to follow up. So that then, after OSP has done all the work, their mandate doesn't allow them to take the next step because the law doesn't ascribe that to them. But the Yoko law had it clearly spelled out, and yet they refrain from doing it. So we need to appreciate the legal context and the challenges being confronted. Let's do the work required to make it easier for them to get those rulings done. And by the way, issues of convictions are just one of the many indicators that ought to be used in terms of assessing the work of the OSP.
Okay, in 1 minute before I let you go, what must change this time in his approach? Because he has served notice that when it comes to the banking sector crisis, he will also be looking into that. The post-election allegations of vote buying, he would be looking into that. So he's keeping his tabs on a number of issues. But what approach should be changed this time?
I think that with a new government in place, we need to strongly pursue the issue of work on the legal frameworks. We need specialized courts and legal frameworks that are tighter, such that if they have to take any cases to court, there's clarity on what the crime is, the offenses, and the sanctions, and the persons involved in that court process are persons who've been trained to assist them. Then we will get better results at the conviction part of it. But I think in the other areas, they're doing quite a bit of good work in terms of investigation, in terms of administrative feedback to improving guidelines and processes that have leakages. I think that a lot of work is being done there. And they need to showcase that much better than they have done in the past, so people understand that other work which is really, really critical to good governance is also being achieved by the OSP.
Thank you, Adam Senanu, an anti-corruption campaigner, for your time here on Newsdesk. Now, we will be back with business updates. Please stay tuned in.
Welcome back to Business on Newsdesk. My name is Winston Taki, and now to our first business story. Chief Operating Officer of Tech Hub, Jemima Prempe, has emphasized the need to harness young people's tech skills to prepare Africa for its entry into the tech space. According to her, this is key to also addressing the state of unemployment. She spoke to Joy Business at the grand finale of Tech Hub Africa's Startup Pitch competition in Accra.
The Tech Hub Africa is an organization dedicated to building a thriving tech ecosystem across Africa to empower innovators on the continent to scale up and further bridge the digital divide, creating the path for Africa to be recognized as a global leader in technology. Chief Operating Officer Jemima Prempeh said to achieve the organization's goal, there's the need to leverage the expertise and knowledge in the space to mentor, coach, nurture, and fund the ideas of young innovators in the country and the continent.
Firstly, we need people with a can-do attitude, right? I think the fear of failure for Africans is too strong. So we have a lot of women who would not even attempt into the tech space, which is sad. But we're here to change that narrative. We feel like women belong in that space, and we want to encourage them from a very young age to take up technology. So we're looking at people in the universities, in the secondary schools, and start encouraging them to enter the tech space. What we intend to do is to help people or help Africa bridge that divide, and that's what I said. Because of that, we need to train them from a very young age. I think with technology, the older people, I mean, their time is gone, let's put it that way. There's still a lot they can learn, but the future belongs to the youth. So they are the people that we're focusing on. If we can get the youth to take up this space, watch out Europe, watch out USA, because we're coming, Africa is coming. That's what I can say.
Tech Hub Africa, co-founded by two sisters, Doreen Ewuku-Ajiman and Jemima Prempeh, aims to foster a vibrant ecosystem that nurtures creative ideas, offers funding, and accelerates the growth of homegrown technologies.
For more business update, visit myjoyonline.com/business for more updates on that. That's all for business here on NewsDeck. My name is Winston Taki. Over to Fosti.
Thank you, Winston, for bringing us business updates. And I told you I was excited when the show started, and I'll tell you why. Because this happens to be the fastest January in the history of January's, trust me. And we are just a few days more to the end of the month. So keep going strong, eh? You'll finish up strong. My name is Fosti Asafo. That's how we wrap up the bulletin. For more news, please log on to myjoyonline.com. Good morning.